Zelensky, I don't know what he's thinking in his mind as far as how he views this end. I haven't heard him speak about it. Do you know what Zelensky's end game is and what he's saying has to happen for the war to end?
Well,
Because it
yeah,
doesn't.
I do know one or two things. I'm not party to these conversations, obviously, but I do know, because he's very clear, that President Zelensky will not cede sovereignty of occupied territory, which is a part of Ukraine, which has been seized illegally and by illegal force. That he will not abandon his hopes of joining NATO altogether. Is it reasonable to ask him to do that? That would be a massive concession to Putin's aggression, would it not?
Well, he ceded. What about Crimea? I mean, that was already ceded under Obama.
It was, but clearly, as far as Ukraine is concerned, that was a consequence of aggression by Russia. Russia went into Crimea illegally. That annexation of Crimea is not recognized by the democratic world. It's not recognized, and the American government under President Trump wants to recognize that. But you're perfectly in support of that, to be clear.
Now, what I'm saying is, well,
Now, I want to have a word, if I can, and welcome to the programme, a warm welcome to Hal Lambert. Given all we've been talking about on the show today, interested to hear what Hal has to say. Hal is a Republican Party donor. Welcome to the programme, Hal.
Thank you, John.
Thank you so much for joining us. Look, so we're talking across Europe, across the free world. We're talking about America's historic role of economic leadership. We're talking about America's historic role as a strategic and security leader for the free world, for the Western Alliance. Certainly that's been the case as long as I've been discussing and reporting politics, and that's a very, very long time. Now, those things are now in serious doubt in a way I've never seen before. How you are a supporter and a donor of the party in power. Are you worried?
No, I'm not worried at all. I mean, you talked about your previous guest saying that U.S. economy is in the toilet. I don't know what he's talking about. I mean, the stock market's down a little bit, so it's in the toilet. I mean, give me a break. Donald Trump is going to strike these trade deals. Ultimately, there will be a deal in Ukraine. I don't know that it's going to happen next week, so that's a pretty easy bet to make.
Yeah.
But it will happen, I think, certainly within the next, I'd say by the end of summer, there'll be some sort of deal in Ukraine. What Donald Trump is asking is for Europe to step up. You guys aren't spending any money on defense. All the saber rattling that came out when they're all going to go in and support Ukraine if the U.S. doesn't.
Yeah.
The Europeans don't have the equipment to even do it. The equipment's not functional. So there's going to have to be a reorder in the sense of more spending on defense,
Right.
Which is what he's talked about, and stepping up to the NATO alliance requirements to spend more money. And I just don't see why that's causing such consternation around the world. And saying that the world is in disarray now because he's asking others to do their part. I don't quite get it.
Right. Let's stick then with defense and security, because you make a couple of points there. You argue that America's European partners in NATO have not been paying their way. Let's say that's fair, because it is fair. That is a fair point to make. And you also make the point that without American support, Ukraine's cause looks pretty much lost. Now, with that in mind, can you conceive of the president you support, the party you support, allowing that to happen, allowing Ukraine to fall victim to Russian aggression, and with it to see the cause of freedom, to put it very simply, lose out to that aggression, that illegal aggression? How I cannot believe that's something you would wish to see.
No, and I don't think President Trump wishes to see that either. But at the end of the day, we've talked about this from early on. What is the end game? Is the only way to end this for Russia to completely pull out of all areas of Ukraine? I don't know that that's realistic, right? And so, what is the negotiated ending of this that's gone on now? Basically 4 years. What is the end game here? And I think ultimately the end game is going to be some form where Russia remains in control of certain parts of Ukraine that it took, and there's going to be a ceasefire. And there's going to be, troops that are there to monitor a ceasefire. I think
could you, Hal? Could you turn your back and withdraw your financial support from a president and a party that did walk away from Ukraine? Could you do that?
I don't want to get into a hypothetical like that. I mean, I think
it's a fair question, Hal.
No, it's not a fair question because when you say turn your back, I mean, what does that mean exactly? What is?
I mean, let's say a repeat of what happened very recently, which was America withdrawing the supply of weapons that are so vital and the supply of intelligence, so crucial to the defense of Ukraine against aerial attack from Russia and on the ground, its ability to wage a war. I mean that by withdrawal.
Yeah, well, he's obviously trying to get Zelensky to the table, and Zelensky, I don't know what he's thinking in his mind as far as how he views this end. I haven't heard him speak about it. Do you know what Zelensky's end game is and what he's saying has to happen for the war to end?
Well,
Because
yeah.
it doesn't.
Well, I do know one or two things. I'm not party to these conversations, obviously, but I do know because he's very clear that President Zelensky will not cede sovereignty of occupied territory, which is a part of Ukraine, which has been seized illegally and by a legal force. That he will not abandon his hopes of joining NATO altogether. Is it reasonable to ask him to do that? That would be a massive concession to Putin's aggression, would it not?
Well, he ceded. What about Crimea? I mean, that was already ceded under Obama.
It was, but clearly, as far as Ukraine is concerned, that was a consequence of aggression by Russia. Russia went into Crimea illegally. That annexation of Crimea is not recognized by the democratic world. It's not recognized, and the American government under President Trump wants to recognize that. But you're perfectly in support of that, to be clear.
Now, what I'm saying is, what's being asked here is for the United States to go to war with Russia over Ukraine. Let's be realistic. That's what's being asked. If the answer is that Russia has to pull everything out of Ukraine, including Crimea, which would obviously be part of that under Zelensky's idea, then that means the United States is going to have to do it, right? Because Ukraine can't do it. Europe can't do it. So the United States needs to go to a war with Russia over Ukraine. That's what's being asked. Are we being clear?
Your position is clear. And after all, that was the point of inviting you on, and you were kind enough to accept. So I wanted your point of view, and you have shared that. It's the beginning, an early stage of this conversation, which will no doubt continue. Hal Lambert, supporter, donor to the Republican Party, thank you so much for coming on the programme.
What she thinks about the fact that President Trump holds Zelensky responsible for the war in Ukraine.
And I don't hold Zelensky responsible, but I'm not exactly thrilled with the fact that that war started. That was a war that would have never started if I were president. You'd have millions of people living right now that are dead. You'd have cities that would be open and thriving, and they'd have their beautiful turrets. Those turrets are the most beautiful in the world, but they're not with us any longer. They're smashed to smithereens, laying on the ground in a million pieces, getting hit by rockets, bombs, and bullets. And so I'm not happy with him, and I'm not happy with anybody involved. I think it's a war. I know it's a war. It didn't happen for 4 years. It was never close to happening. It was never even a thought. And I spoke to President Putin about it a lot. It was the apple of his eye, but there's no way he would have ever gone in if I were president. Now I'm trying to get him to stop because, as you know, Russia's a lot bigger. It's a bigger military force. And if you're smart, you don't go involved and get involved in wars that you can blame the man that was sitting in this seat, Biden. He didn't know what the hell was going on. But I can guarantee you that, and everybody agrees to it, if I were president, that war would have never taken place. I'm not blaming him. But what I am saying is that I wouldn't say he's done the greatest job. Okay? I'm not a big fan. I really am. I'm not a big fan. I hope that Europe is going to be great again. Europe is going through a lot of problems. Go ahead.
Ukraine's President Zelensky has said he has evidence that China is supplying weaponry or ammunition to Russia. Do you have any evidence along those lines? And also, he said we could see a minerals deal signed this week. Is that?
Well, we have a minerals deal, which I guess is going to be signed on Thursday, Scott, next Thursday, soon. And I assume they're going to live up to the deal, so we'll see. But we have a deal on that. No, I have no comment on that. I have no idea. That's his statement, not mine.
Mr. President,
how much longer does Vladimir Putin have to respond to your ceasefire proposal before you put secondary tariffs or sanctions on Russia?
We'll see what that will be. We're going to be hearing from them this week. very shortly, actually, and we'll see. But we want it to stop. We want the death and the killing to stop. No, wait, next, go.